Hey, Off Color fam. Just wanted to let you guys know a couple housekeeping things. We did miss a week, but now we are back on schedule. So episodes will go up every other Monday. And I wanted to let people know that All Mixed Up, our Changing Racial Identities, a film project, will be premiering May 9th at the C Film Center in Denver, and you can get tickets. Just visit www.mixedupusa.com. And one more thing, if you are a Black parent, if you are an ally, and you are in Denver, you may want to consider attending the Our Voice, Our Schools Black Parent Empowerment Summit, which will be Saturday, May 12th, 2018. And it will be at the Shorter AME Church located in Denver, Colorado. And you can register online at breakingourchains.org. You are listening to Off Color, a podcast where we talk about race and help you learn how to talk about race, hopefully. I'm Rebecca Henderson, a.k.a. the Tan Tigress, a.k.a. the African from, well, kinda. And I got my producer and my white homie, James. And this is Off Color. So tonight, straight out of the basement, we have two very special guests, and both were close personal friends and colleagues of the late Dr. Diggs, whom we are continuously missing. But I think it's important to note that his spirit is with us, especially tonight, because we will be talking about education, miseducation, community organizing, and all that good stuff that he always showed up for. Okay? And I will try to be on my best behavior, and I promise not to call white people expletives, because apparently that is not the way to change my hearts and minds. Okay? So I apologize for episode 12's aggressive sales pitch for Honorable Disorder, which opens April 6th. At the Cleo Parker Robinson.
Can we make it clear that I did not request this? This has nothing to do with me.
It sounds so forced. It sounds contrived as shit. I swear. But go ahead.
Okay, but I'm not gonna call white people names and stuff. Okay, but
bitches was the word they used.
I'm not gonna call white people bitches. It was just, listen. You know what? I'm half white. Okay, so I can talk shit about white people, right?
Apparently not.
No, I'm doing it again. I'm already off. Okay, I'm sorry. So back to our guests.
Did you was there actually some pushback from that, or is this just your paranoia?
I mean, I just felt kind of bad when I listened to it, because it was a surprise to me after the drinking that we had been doing on the podcast. So again, I apologize to my white brethren. Please don't not go to see Jeff Campbell's Honorable Disorder, because I said you were bitches and you had to buy tickets. Please forgive me, my guests. So listen, I want to welcome back H-Soul.
It's good to be back.
Okay. So listeners, you may remember H-Soul from our very special 2-part Black Panther episode, in which we all got drunk except for H-Soul, who schooled us and turned us all a little hotepish around the edges, especially white James.
Hotepish.
And
it's really a word.
Okay, all right.
Just a little bit around the edges, okay?
We're just priming up for next week's apology.
Right.
One down.
I'm just saying it's true, because I feel like after H-Soul was schooling us, we were all like, and then Ken was like, my husband, who is mostly white, but he's still Black to me, he was on board too. And so everybody was like, yeah, H-Soul. And then everyone was feeling very moved by your words. So I want to introduce, so we have H-Soul here, and then we also have a very special guest, Fernando Branch. I'll introduce you because I feel like doing that. So Fernando is originally from Memphis, Tennessee. But he calls Colorado his home. He's a father, a husband, and an educator extraordinaire. He's passionate about teaching and learning, closing the achievement gap, and is known as an outstanding leader in the education community. Now, I know it's your first time in the basement, Fernando, and I hope that you can enjoy it.
Oh, I am. Glad to be here.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here tonight, you guys. All right. So a couple of things are going on right now. Well, okay. Before I get into the topic that I really wanted to discuss with you, I do want to talk about this idea of the Hotep. Because the last time you were on my program, H-Soul, you said I said Hotep, and you said, I've been called Hotep, I've been called asshole, and then I felt like you were insinuating that I didn't know what Hotep means.
No. No, I'm saying, but when people use the word Hotep now, it's a derogatory term. So when I was saying that, that in the same vein as using the word asshole or whatever, what have you, it's just that being a Hotepper is not something that is it's used as a slight. It's not used as a compliment. Although
Yes.
yeah, so
It is. Well,
yes.
because it can be quite, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for. We're going to have to get back to that at a later date. But I just wanted to make sure that you were not insinuating that I did not know what I was talking about.
She doesn't want to make sure that your feelings weren't hurt.
Right,
She wants to make sure that you didn't think that she didn't know.
Listen, I know
She
whose
was-
show I'm on. This is her show, man. All right, so
Your insinuations were what she was concerned with.
I'm just always having to fight.
I called you a Hotepper, and I want to make sure you weren't, thinking that I don't know what I'm talking about. Not that I equated you with an asshole, right?
That wasn't passive aggressive.
No,
at all, right?
Listen, bro.
Oh, man.
We just gotten started, man. Welcome to the basement.
We'll get to full blown aggressive in a few minutes.
I want to take it to as serious as I can be.
Okay.
Because I do feel like I should, full disclosure, I did go to the Young People's Hip Hop Party last night. Now, that's not the name of the party. It was just a lot of young people, and I'm old, so it was a little bit, it was popping off in there with Riaga. That's his name. I think he pronounces it Riaga, but I like to say Riaga.
How's it spelled?
Riaga. And he'll be on to talk about, we're going to do a very special mixed race episode. I can't wait to do that. But anyway, so I was out very late last night, which I typically am not because I am a mother and an upstanding member of my community. And so this evening when I got home, I did have a Bloody Mary before you guys came over. Then I had a glass of wine. Now I'm having this whiskey. So I feel like I'm starting off a little warmer than normal.
Okay.
Coming in hot.
All right.
No, but all right. So I'm gonna pull it together, and I'm gonna get ready to ask questions. So I'm gonna read you a statistic, if I may. It is, and then this is so Black education is on the rise, according to the U.S. Census. Okay, so from like 1940 to 2017, it has. I even have a little chart here, and you can see the growth is pretty substantial, right? From like less than 5% to 23.9% for Black people as a whole. And so, yes.
To have what? To have a college degree?
Yes. That they're for age 25 and older with a bachelor's degree or higher. So I see a statistic like that, right? Now, my first thought when I see a statistic like this that's saying, okay, the education piece, that it's on the rise, like more people, I automatically feel like this is almost like a tool for the dominant culture to be like, look, the education there, it's going up. How could we, how is it bad? If it's going up. So that's one. So I just kind of want you to have that in the back of your mind as we're talking about some of these educational issues that we're facing now in the country, locally here and also nationwide. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. So when I see that, and then I think about the work that you're doing, H-Soul, right now, I just kind of wanted to know, like, what were your thoughts on that? What's the first thought you had when I was like, it's on the rise?
That education's on the rise.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had several thoughts around that. At first, I would have to check the source and
It is the census.
right, and have people like this is where people ancestor Gregory Diggs would be great at taking data and actually demystifying the story behind the data, right? Because you can make data tell any story that you want it to. He would tell me that all the time, especially in regards to how DPS used his talents. So that's my first. I'm always skeptical of it, and I think Fernando probably would be also, given that he's another brother with his boots on the ground. So I think I'm just very skeptical of how that type of information is sourced and how it's gathered and how it's computed. And so that's not to say that I don't think that Black people are educating themselves or going through the system of education, which is a whole nother discussion in and of itself, as far as what are they gaining or getting through going through that process. I would immediately take a statistic like that and measure it against the increase of Black and Indigenous people inside of the prison system. I would also compare it to the amount of children between the ages of 10 and 14 that are committing suicide. So I just had, I don't take any of those type of stats in a vacuum.
Right. Okay. Fernando?
I agree with a lot of what H-Soul just stated. The first thing I thought about was the fact that I know that statistic is true, right? But within that statistic, I also understand that 1 in every 4 African-American male will at some point experience incarceration. So let's think about that, 1 in every 4. The statistic that goes along with that.
We only need 1.5 in here right now. That one. Wait.
Well, exactly.
Got
right?
Soul's daughter in here.
Exactly, and we know, nationally, not just in Colorado, but we know nationally that our Latino boys and African American boys, when we look at the opportunity gap, that's the larger percentage of our kids, our children who are incarcerated, and those figures don't necessarily speak into that. But the other hand is this, though, right? African American women are getting bachelor degrees at a larger percentage,
at a higher rate.
And that's fantastic. But I think you have to, again, to H-Soul point, data can be interpreted in many different ways.
And I don't want to hijack this about mixed race, but you know how I do it. But here is something that happens also. Like, I identify as Black, but I have to say, and I know in all my applications that I have checked Black and down, through the years, they're counting me in that statistic as a Black person, and I have far more advantages than a quote unquote monoracial person. I know that, and I had a different kind of background. I grew up in wealthy suburbs, blah blah blah. So they're putting me in there too, in those numbers. Yeah. And I think that that's something to consider as well, because I'm from like a middle class background, whereas like James over here, he's blue collar, working class, he had less opportunities than I had, I don't know if that means anything, but do you feel any kind of way about that, James?
No, I don't. But I agree with what you're saying about that's one of the ways that data can be used, is that, of course, there's that simple data that just has an X and Y axis doesn't take any sort of intersectionality into account. And
I will say, I think it is intentional, because do you know where I got this from?
Where?
I got it. It's like the census history, and it's the government's Black History celebration to show how many achievements that African Americans have made. And when I looked at it, I'm missing ancestor digs as well, because when I looked at it, I got mad when I saw it. And that was just my initial reaction. And he could always like break that down for me. Like, what is the emotional feeling I'm having? Because I'm like, this is bullshit. And they're putting it out there like it's like, oh, there's no racism. That's what this stat said to me.
Yes. Or there's no achievement gap, right?
Yeah. And you said something interesting, a phrase I have not heard. Opportunity gap.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that. Have you ever heard that?
I'm not sure.
No, James? No,
opportunity gap I've for sure heard.
Okay. I personally feel like, I just learned something. Like, I really liked that. Where does that come from?
Well, it's one within the same thing, right? I think people interpret it when you think of it as being a achievement gap, right? You're basing it on test scores. You're basing it on those intangible things in which districts, schools, the government that we base the current structures of education on. Well, when we look at it from an opportunity gap, right? And this is why I'm glad I'm by you, man. We looking at it from the lens of more of a community focused lens. How we meet the needs of our kids. If we're meeting the needs of our kids, then we're also meeting the needs of our adults, right? That whole child approach to our community, how we provide jobs, and more importantly, how we pushing kids to post-secondary readiness. So I like to use the opportunity gap because it gives that belief and that understanding that every kid should have a solid education. Every kid should have the opportunity to get a quality education in the public or any other school setting. Yeah.
So I feel, in general, I feel quite informed, but I feel like on this issue, I am not as informed as I should be or as I need to be. And part of it is because my kid is little, and he's not entering the public school system at this time. But he will be soon. And so I've been thinking about that. H-Soul is very active on Facebook. And I feel like you use that as a tool to communicate with people and let things know. And I feel like you've been tagging me in a lot of things. And I'm really grateful for that because I feel like it helps me be tapped into it, even if I can't attend or, I just like to know that things are going on. I just feel like it feels really hopeless to me right now when I look at some of these statistics, when I see videos. What is the young man's name from Montbello, the teacher? He's Jamaican, I think.
You're talking about who just made the video about the library.
Yeah.
That's our brother.
Duvall.
Yeah.
Duvall?
Yeah,
Duvall, okay.
Randall Duvall.
So I just, hey Randall, friended you on Facebook. But because if I see a Jamaican flag, I'm always like, ooh, because, I'm a kid.
He's actually from South Africa, but it's a very similar flag.
Are you kidding me right now?
No, he's from
He
South
had a
Africa.
Jamaican flag on his jacket. I saw it.
Okay.
I'm a fact check myself.
He did have a Jamaican flag on his jacket.
So
but he is from South Africa,
He's from
though.
South
Didn't know he was
Africa.
from South Africa,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying because when I see that, I'm always drawn to it because of my husband's background
Right.
and our son and all that. So I'm always looking for more Jamaican people to hang out with, right? Anyway.
South Africa's cool too, so you can still invite him over.
Oh, I will.
Okay.
He seems very nice.
Yeah, he's good people.
But seeing that video that he posted on his page, and the video, what it was him walking around this empty library. Now, as a librarian, that
Which is why I tagged you in that.
hurt
Yes, your
my soul.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And I can't even I feel like I can't even, it sounds like I'm doing a speech about it, but it's the truth. I watched it and my heart was breaking, and it's disgusting is what it is. It's disgusting. And when you see those kinds of inequities, and then that article you posted where the kids had the pedal desks, and then nobody even has any books in Montbello, that's just crazy to me. It's crazy. And so I'm feeling a little bit
discouraged.
That's right. So give me some hope, H-Soul. Give me the hope.
Give you some hope.
Lay it on me.
Okay, so the thing is that I love the fact that my brother Fernando's from Memphis, because people from the South have a very different understanding of those of us who were raised in the North about community. And in the South, we know that we can do a lot with very little. Right? Before going green was all popular within white culture. We grew up reusing oil from the skillet and putting it in the Crisco can. We were repurposing before repurposing was cool. And I say that to say that we were educating and creating black genius before Brown versus the Board of Education. And a lot of what we've done has gotten away from it. And integration did a lot of that. I said it earlier this evening, one of the most brutal things that happened to Black and Indigenous education was integration, because it took Black students, but it left out Black teachers and Black educators. So while we sent our Black children into white schools, the white schools did not open their doors to the Black educators.
Yeah.
So what we have to get back to is the basics, right? And that comes from community organizing, which is why I'm in community organizing work. And in order to make systems respond to the will of community, we have to be organized. And that's the process that I'm going about now. I had originally put out a call for 100 Black parents to show up to this May 12th event. Randall Duvall responded online by saying that my vision was too small, that in order to make an impact, we would need 300. And when I heard that, I was like, how are we going to get 300 Black parents to go to anything that doesn't have R. Kelly, anything that doesn't...
Boo, R. Kelly.
I'm just saying.
Don't get me started on R. Kelly.
I know what our people usually they usually show up for.
Pardon me.
Right, party.
Can you talk for a minute about what the event is?
I will. So within the first 5 days of putting out the call for that event, we had 156 registrants for it. So
all right.
we have 6 weeks to go until the event. So we will have 300 Black, brown, and allied white people learning about the importance of Black education and Black parents inside of that education, as Fernando just spoke about, the importance of whole child, which is really community, right?
Right.
So the event on May 12th is entitled the Black Parent Empowerment Summit. We're having 300 Black parents show up so that they can spend a day, half of the day they'll be learning about how to become Black parent advocates, how to become parent advocates for their children, which deals a lot with organizing, how to organize, who is their school board member, who are the school board members, how are decisions made, what are the budgets around, just educating them around the system, right? Because in order to change it, to alter it, or to destroy it, you just need to understand what it is. And a lot of Black parents don't engage the system because of PTSD, the trauma that they've experienced going through the system. And this is especially true now for our Indigenous brothers and sisters, our Latinx brothers and sisters, because they're living under a regime that is looking to deport them. So while Black and Indigenous people deal with the school to prison pipeline, our Latinx brothers and sisters are now having to deal with from the school to deportation pipeline that is now being created by this particular presidential regime. And so it's very real. And in order to combat that, the only way to combat that is for us to be organized. And that's what this event is on May the 12th, is really organizing ourselves and giving ourselves tools necessary to become parent advocates.
Okay, where is this event?
It's at Shorter AME Church, which is on 32nd and Colorado Boulevard.
Is there a cost for this event?
The event is free.
It's free.
It's free.
And where do you go to register for it?
So you can post the link inside when you post your podcast up. But for those people that you can go to breakingourchains.org and go to Our Voice, Our Schools Black Parent Empowerment Summit. Or you can find me on Facebook at Hasira Ashemu, and it's all over my page as well.
Thank you. Yeah. So this came up today. I had a thought about it, and I think I know what you're going to say, but I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure I know. I happened to run into a friend of mine who, she's white, and her son is mixed race. Daddy's Black, and he's or half Black, and the baby looks like he should be my baby. But it's really, he's so cute. Anyway, sorry, I got distracted by that. I keep thinking of that mean joke you made. On the episode, when you said I thought I was having Idris Elba.
You were dreaming about Idris.
And my husband, you know what Ken said? He He said, you thought you were having T'Challa and you had the Winter Soldier.
Hey, it happens.
It was just, okay. I'm sorry, I got distracted by that. But anyway, so I was specifically thinking about her for a moment because she asked me who's going to be on the show tonight and all that. And she was like, oh man, I would love to go to that. And I just thought, I was like, oh, is it a space like...
Yes, is the answer to your question.
I know that's the answer, but
so
I feel
we have a
like,
white track. We have what is called. So we have 3 tracks.
Well, stand by. Mm-hmm. But my question is, though, I think you're going to answer it. Mm-hmm. Psychic moment here. But just white parents of black or mixed or black presenting kids. Mm-hmm. What plans do you have for those parents?
Okay, so they would be on our ally track.
Okay, but what if their kid is black?
Then their child would be in our youth track.
Okay.
So here's the thing. You can have a black child and still and more than not experience white privilege. Mm-hmm. So just because you have a black child does not absolve you from...
Of course not.
Right,
Yeah. That's a PSA, actually. So all of you people who think that you can't be racist because you love a person of color and you're sleeping with them and you have a person of color that is your baby, that does not excuse you. And that does not mean that you cannot be part of the racist dominant culture.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you're gearing up for your apology next week or not, but the point that I was making is that white people are invited as allies to this conference specifically, and Fernando can speak to this as well. 84% of the teachers that are inside of the Denver public schools are white.
Ooh.
78% of those are white women. So it is important that we re-educate white educators about what our expectations are of them when they're in front of our children, for one. 2, to understand the way that the implicit bias plays out in educating our children. And we are taking it upon ourselves as a community to be responsible for that re-education of those teachers, because we don't have a lot of faith that the system as it is now will do that. And so we are inviting our white allies for a day of re-education on how to educate black and brown children, as well as how to become advocates for black teachers, administrators, when they are in the building, understanding that how important, and Fernando probably knows this, he's probably posted it 2 or 3 times.
I might have.
There was a study that just was released very recently that said children, all races, black, white, brown, prefer teachers of color, right? And that's a very important study. Nothing that black or brown people would be surprised about, but I think it may have caught white people off.
Fernando, can you tell me a little bit more about this? Because I did not see it.
Yeah. Can I go back just a little bit?
Oh, of course.
I want to go back just a little bit to something you said, H-Soul, about the need for white parents who have black kids or kids of color to also be present. I want to offer you a different suggestion. I think social intelligence, right? If you are a white person with a child of color, I think you have to understand that your child has different levels of post-traumatic stress. You know what? I'll go as far as to say prolonged post-traumatic stress, right? That they live and they go through consistently. And I think it's a different conversation when you have to be reflective upon your privilege and think about how my child's privilege or lack thereof is interpreted totally different. That's a very vulnerable state to be in, right? And that's not an area where you see school districts, governments being open and receptive to providing assistance on what does that level of social intelligence look like for me as a parent who is raising a child of color. And let me go another step back. that's not even to say that it's a white parent. That's even for a black parent, right? Because if you're a black person, you're dealing with the exact same microaggressions consistently all the time, right? What does that support look like for you, and how are you teaching those different strategies and coping strategies to your child? So to H-Soul's point, I'm a firm believer in community because I think we have to galvanize around the things that we know that work, right? It's not going to change if we just sit back and let someone else dictate what that change looks like when we know exactly what the change should be. But I think you also have to be receptive to open ideas, as well as being inclusive to and reflective to a sense where you're putting different ideas on the table and you're being open to all individuals who are involved. Now, to your second question, I think it was more around what was it specifically?
Around the study that just came out.
Same-sex gender. Yeah. I think that's, I'm going to give you my reality, right? I'm from the South. And I didn't see a black male educator in the South until I was in my senior year of high school. Okay? When I saw it, it was profound. Yeah. It was profound because these were the individuals who were teaching me about Kemet, about Timbuktu, about history that I didn't even know existed. Right? I thought that black history was slavery and 1870 until modern day. I had no idea about the other components. Yeah. So when I think about our kids and me being an administrator, diversity, somebody told me a long time ago, and I think it holds true. They said diversity is only important to people of color. Now, I say that to challenge your listeners as well as to challenge ourselves to say that diversity should be something that's important to all of us. Because if we don't have diversity, then we don't have perspective in the room. And if we don't have perspective in the room, then we definitely don't have the answer because the answer is in the room. Right? So, I'm one to say that
that's brilliant.
It's important to value that different level of diversity and be intentional with school planning, both on the operational side as well as the instructional side, because kids need to see individuals that look like them, but they also need to see individuals that don't look like them to grow in their areas of deficit.
Yeah, that's where, so.
Beautiful.
Nothing I say reflects my employer. But that is something that I've thought about too. In one way, I think about staffing like at any public library where you want the staff to reflect the community. But I feel like it is equally as important that me, a woman of color, be a manager in the affluent public library where I work, if I were the manager. Do you know what I'm saying?
Amen.
Because that's better I think that's good for the community, right? So anyway, I just guess I'm just saying, I agree with you. Well, but it's super important. But the other thing though, that made me think when you said that, I thought, have I ever had a black male teacher? And I just kind of am scanning through my memories, and I think we had a track coach, a gym teacher maybe? Or
a security guard.
I grew up in Westchester, and I didn't really have enough fancy. I'm just kidding. I don't think we had security guards. I don't actually remember.
Right.
But, I mean, just that. James, do you remember having a black teacher?
One that I can remember, senior year of high school, math teacher. That's the only one I can remember.
Yeah,
wow.
I can't. So, and we're from a pretty diverse area. So just the thought of that, I'm like, oh, yeah. And then even I'm thinking about college. I didn't have any black teachers in college.
Right. So then you get to understand exactly how important Fernando is. For us as a community, how important he is. And
protect him at all costs.
Basically.
No,
right?
But yeah.
No,
yeah.
absolutely.
No.
The impact that he has just with his presence.
Yeah.
Right. And according to the Bailey report, which is the report that was done about 1.5 years or 2 years ago, out of DPS by Dr. Sharon Bailey, a longtime community member. She talks about the pushing out of Black educators, teachers, administrators. So the fact that Fernando is still in the position that he is in, again, is in itself a minor miracle based upon the behavior and the systemic trends that take place with Black and Indigenous people inside of school districts. Again, I don't, and I use this comparison, understanding the gravity that comes with it. The current Denver public school system, Aurora public school system, is set up on a plantation system, where you have most of the people that are participating, meaning the students, are 76-77% Black and Indigenous. Just the opposite is true for who's teaching them and who's in director positions inside of that system. And so what we have to, again, do is to organize in such a way that we flip that. That's, for one, it's undemocratic. We can't live and tout and have students learning about quote-unquote democracy, and they themselves are participating in a mathematical anomaly, right? It is impossible to have those numbers without systemic biases, systemic racism taking place. And our children are dealt and told to accept this mathematical anomaly without question. And that in and of itself drives a lot of the misbehaviors and misunderstandings that our children have, because they're faced with that on a daily basis without it being given voice to. And so we need to organize so that we flip those numbers. We're not saying that we don't need or want white educators. What we're saying is that 8.5 out of every single teacher inside of a system that is educating people of color should not be white.
Right.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
So I want to just simply add to that. I see both sides of it, right? If we do that, what happens? Student achievement, the opportunity gap achievement, right? We close the gap because now it's an extension of the community. It's an extension of the family. I state that because when you think about systems, right? The incarceration system in this country outfunds the public education system. I don't know, probably 90%, right, to 1. So what does it say when I think I saw a graphic the other day that says that in the state of California, it was about $100,000 to take care of an inmate compared to around $12,000 for the same student to go to college. I think about, particularly our state here, right? Tabor. I'm looking at, Colorado. Hey, I love Colorado. I moved there for opportunity, for the fact that it was innovative, but we're number, 12 in the country as far as household funding or income. And we're number 45 per pupil funding for education. That's ridiculous. And, I feel very comfortable saying that as an educator, because I understand that if I'm looking at New York or Massachusetts that's putting in $25K per individual kid, with those resources come people. With those people come more assets that you can create significant systematic change in order to improve the lives of not just kids, but community. And I think somewhere we have to be reflective enough to get back to the fact that it's a holistic approach. It's not a one-size-fit-all.
Bro, I'm about to get in trouble.
Very good
but
point.
but one of the things when I worked in the schools, because I used to work in the schools in San Francisco, and I worked in, I don't even know what we call them anymore, but like at the time we called it an inner city school. I feel like that term is antiquated.
Absolutely, Black school.
Inner city. That's Michelle Pfeiffer.
Yeah, I know, right? Try to slide that one in. You're not gonna slide that one in.
Right.
Okay, so
Inner city or urban.
but I did feel like I used to kind of make a joke, but I wasn't kidding. Like I was like, I'm here to educate these kids, to help these kids, to be a role model for these kids, so they don't rob me on the bus later, because I'm riding the same bus as them. I'm living in the same area, right? I'm passing through there. And so that was like, I'm trying to keep the whole community safe by like giving these kids that opportunity, right? And that was how I felt about it.
Yes.
You know, and I don't want to make it seem like, oh, I'm looking at all these black and brown kids, I think they all are robbers or something. But I just,
No, of course not.
you know, but I was just thinking about it on this way of like, I want to make sure that they have.
That you have a vested interest in making sure that they're
But I was also
educated.
like, I'm not trying to get robbed
Shamed.
either on the bus.
Right, I get it.
I'm like, I'm riding through the Fillmore.
This really did become a dangerous mind scenario.
It's true. But we don't know. I gotta look out for me too.
I hear you.
I'm
Your
a
life
lady.
matters. Rebecca's life matters. I'm with you. I'm with you.
Well, why do you guys think America has so much trouble wrapping their head around that idea that seems so incredibly obvious?
Which idea is that?
The idea that educating children is a generally profitable thing to do, even if you've decided you don't give a shit about the kids, which our culture does seem to have decided. And there are racial disparities, of course, that are huge. The truth is they don't seem to give a lot of a shit about any kids. And I don't understand where is the huge disconnect with, okay, if we're in America and we have to tie everything to the bottom line, fine. Can we also acknowledge that educating people is just smart in every way? What's the disconnect? Why is that so culturally difficult for us?
I think I'll let you take the latter approach on this one. I would say that I can speak for what's going on right now in my district. That one significant positive thing is that we realize that third grade literacy scores dictates the number of prisons that are developed 10 to 20 years later. You know, Denver as a whole, and Denver is not the only district, but there are several other districts that are, you know, they're banking on investing in early childhood literacy, because we realize that the gap, you know, 5 years ago, we didn't know this. We know now that the gap starts pre-K, K. Right? So if we can invest resources and we can provide people to, regardless of where the kids coming from, the scenario, the situation, socioeconomics, it's irrelevant. If we can get the kid caught up by third grade, the likelihood of that kid going to college is about 86% rate. Wow. So on that sense, I think that we are achieving and we are going in the right direction, right? Now, and I'm going to pass over to you, Soul, on this one. But before I pass it, I'm going to give you a nugget. The latter of the two makes a lot of money, right?
Right.
The latter of the two is a system that's set up that produces a lot of money that unfortunately doubles the cost of what one pupil in education would be. How do you deal with that? You guys give me the answer. I would fucking love the answer. Right? Did I say that on here? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, to tag team with Fernando, coming off the top rope, we have to understand that education, and this is the part that many people of color miss, but white people don't miss it so much because they understand. That education works hand in hand with quote unquote security in this country as the two major systems of social control. So as systems of social control, and this even goes back to the formation of public education in this country, right? And why it was formed and who it was formed for. It was always formed as a system of social control. It wasn't built as a system of, we live in a capitalist system that dictates that there's a few at the top and the rest and some in the middle and most at the bottom. Our education system is built to mimic and to sustain that particular status quo. So the truth of the matter is, and Fernando just spoke on this, we know how to educate children. That's not a mystery to us. When it comes to when it comes to educating children in this country, we're 19th as far as quote unquote developed countries. When you remove equity out of it, we're number 2. So that's to say that if we educated all children equitably, we would be number 2 in the country. So we know how to educate children. As Fernando pointed to, there's a vested interest by a small but powerful group of people in keeping and maintaining education so that it benefits a few and controls the rest. So when a white kid goes to school in a middle class, upper class neighborhood, he's being taught an education of controller. When a Black, Indigenous, Latinx, or poor white person goes to a school in a working class community, he's being taught the education of worker.
Right.
And so these systems are reinforcing this, and which again buttresses exactly what Fernando is saying. The education system as it's operating is doing exactly. It's not because we don't understand it or we don't know how to educate children or we don't get it, or it's not for any naive reasons, or we know how to educate children, but the people who control the levers are doing so for their own selfish capitalistic purposes, and that's why we have to remove them by any means necessary.
Don't get me started. Now, but I will say, I wanted to talk, I wanted to ask about charter schools. If we can talk a little bit about that. Are you well versed in the subject?
Well, he's in the far northeast, so he's probably more versed than most
pretty
people.
So to me, in my mind, like in theory, right? Sounds good, doesn't it? It's charter school for the neighborhood to meet the needs. But I feel like people don't really understand. I mean, we have the strikes going on now in
Oklahoma. Yeah.
Well, I'm really prepared. No, I'm sorry. But I'm just saying, West Virginia just happened. That's the best one.
Kentucky as well.
Yeah. So I feel like teachers are striking, and a lot of them are like, I don't know what this charter school thing is, but I'm pretty sure I don't want it. You know what I mean? And so I want to know, and I feel like Betsy DeVos, our Secretary of Education, #garbage. I feel like anything that is coming out of this administration, then I'm like, oh, I know that's wrong. That's how I feel. So what are your thoughts on the charter school, on the model? Can you just speak a little bit about that to help let our listeners know?
I would say that, when you think about DeVos and charter schools, you're thinking about Michigan, right? And you're thinking about failed experiment. When you think about Denver, this is the thing that I think that's significant, right? Because most of my experience have been in traditional public school settings. And it might surprise some of your listeners, but I'm an advocate, actually, for school first. Because if you're an advocate for school first, then you're an advocate for student achievement first. And if you're an advocate for student achievement, then at the end of the day, if kids are going to college, regardless of whether they went through a charter or public alike, it's irrelevant, right? It's that next step. When I look at a lot of DPS charters, I see a lot of good things. And this is why, right? When we talk about equity, some of our biggest charters are around 85% students of color.
Yeah.
Now, somebody might get mad at me, but if you got a school,
don't worry, we're gonna protect you at all costs.
So hear me though, right? If you got a school that's 85 to 93% Black and brown kids that make up the population of Denver's population, right, of students, and they're putting kids in school, why not be an advocate? My question would be, and it's a fairly simple question. If they're doing it, then why can't everybody do it at the exact same rate? And I think that's where we have to really look at internal operations of systems. Like, it's not acceptable, in my opinion, for a charter to have a 100% graduation rate to a 4-year university, and we have other schools that have alternative pathways where students are going into community college. Let's set the bar to be the bar, right? And, whatever those systems and structures are in place across the board, whether it's a traditional school of any caliber, right? One of the big five or the big two within the charter network, collaboration, I think, truly is the key if we're putting student interest first, right? So I'm an advocate personally because I'm an advocate for kids.
So I think we probably have gotten to the first point in this show where me and Brother Fernando probably disagree.
Yeah, I knew it was bound to happen. But it's all good, though. It's all good.
But the truth of the matter is, I don't think we disagree on results in particular. The unfortunate part, and that we have to understand, is that in order to for those charter schools to achieve those type of successes, they have to take away from other places, right? And so while we have a great, and that's the piece that we can't look at any particular school or set of schools in a vacuum. We have to look at a public school system as just that, a system. So while there are parts of a body that are succeeding, they're succeeding at the expense of another part of the body, and that is how we have to look at charter schools in a holistic manner, and not just what is happening necessarily at a particular school or a particular set of schools. So while I agree with Fernando in the sense that it isn't that success is to be celebrated in those schools, we have to understand that the charter school movement has been co-opted by corporations. And because, again, Fernando being from the South, he'll have an appreciation for the fact that charter schools for Black people were the first freedom schools. We were the first ones that had to create alternative means in order to educate our children, which is essentially what charter schools are. So Black people fundamentally don't, and indigenous people don't fundamentally have a problem with the charter school as it was
intended for.
Yes, intended for. What has happened is it has come in and been McDonaldized, where you have these corporations that are now realizing that public education is the final frontier as far as dismantling of these social institutions that were put in place in this country, and now it's something to be monetized. It's something to be to make profit from, and to fuel the even the nonprofit industrial complex. And so, in looking in charters in a bigger scope, in a larger scope, there's a woman that has done an excellent book on this phenomenon. Her name is Noliwe Rooks, and she wrote a book called Cutting School. And in this book, she details specifically the charterization of Black education. Who were the people fundamentally behind it originally? Are many of the same people who are behind the charter school movement now, specifically as a means to profit off of the miseducation or the type of education that Black and indigenous people would receive. Back in the Reconstruction era, she talks about a lot of the rich tycoons got together and said, listen, in the South specifically, we just freed all these Black people. Let's make them good workers, lest they destroy our wonderful white society. And so that's when you look at a lot of the HBCUs, which I'm a product of, and so is Brother Fernando. These schools were technical schools. They were schools to nursing schools and schools to be servants, right? And so it's important that when we have the charter school conversation to understand that I must iterate this to your listeners. I'm in full support of the Black and indigenous children, the Black and indigenous educators that are inside of these buildings. I don't mean to demean their work, their passion, or their achievements. But it is important for us to take things and look at, to widen our gaze, to use Sherlock Holmes' phrase, to widen our gaze so that we have an understanding of where do charter schools fit inside of what is happening to education as a whole in this country, and not just keep a narrow view of what it may be doing in a particular area at a particular time.
I'm going to read a quote now.
Okay.
That means a lot to me.
Yeah, clearly.
The paradox of education is precisely this. That as one begins to become conscious, one begins to examine the society in which he is being educated. Name that black man. James
Baldwin.
Okay, so that
James
means a lot to me, though, and I was thinking about it as you were speaking, the both of you. Okay, and this idea of the more we think about it, the wider our eyes have to be opened, and we have to really be very intentional about the choices that we're making. And so, I mean, you're giving me a lot to think about too. And my son, my boy's fine, right?
Well, no, actually, he's not.
They
This
know me.
is the point that, I made this point to Brother Jeff when I was on his show. It is a mistake for us to assume that because white kids are and actually, Brother Fernando made this point even more poignantly, and I'll draw us back there. If you are growing up inside a non-diverse environment, even though you're achieving academically, you are missing out on the fuller picture of what's
Right.
taking place in society, and this is what causes blind spots
Yeah.
in whiteness. So while he would be receiving a great academic education, he is missing out on.
He's not missing out on nothing in my house.
Well, right. I'm just saying.
So let's be
I
clear
want
on
the point
that.
to be made, though, that the children in Cherry Creek or the children in DPS who are going to all white schools or predominantly white schools that are succeeding academically but lack diversity, lack a curriculum that exposes them to a James Baldwin, that exposes them to a Harlem Renaissance, that exposes them to the richness of what America is, which is its diversity, is in fact doing their children a huge disservice in the sense that you have a president that doesn't know that certain black figures like Langston Hughes or Frederick Douglass are no longer living now, right? And he received a top-notch, quote-unquote, top-notch education, right? George Bush as well. So that is evidence of the disservice that even white people are doing to themselves by not educating all equitably.
I would also say that our children spend a lot more time in school than they do with us. And
Yeah.
that's something that I find now that my daughter's in kindergarten and is in public school is, I always sort of had an idea in my head. Public schooling failed me a lot when I was a kid. And I always kind of had this idea in my head, well, we're a literate household and we're a politically engaged household. And so much of it is what's in the household. And I cannot believe how much of the precious little time that I have with my daughter after school is spent on learning her things that she comes home and says to me that she heard in school. So unfortunately, what's going on in the house is not always enough to counteract.
Well, and I feel like I hear that a lot when people wanting to like homeschool their kids. And I joke, but it's not really a joke. I'm like, if I homeschool Kingston, he's gonna come out kind of dumb. So I can't, I can't homeschool him. I can barely add. Like, public school also failed me, right? But I used to think that homeschool people were like total weirdos. That's really what I thought.
I homeschool my daughter.
I know, but listen to me. That's what I said. I used to think that. But now that I'm a parent, I'm like, I see why. Because like I want to make sure that my Kingston gets the best education, right? Because he's my kid. And so that's why we live in this old racist neighborhood, because we want to make sure that we have like the quote unquote best school for him, right? We want to make sure that we have access to that.
Right.
This is not our first choice.
I get it. That's how important education is.
That's
to
right.
us, right? How much we value it and see it as a value, and that's always been true for us. That's always been true for us. In fact, and again, Fernando can speak on this much more eloquently than I can, as far as from an experiential position. a lot of times those of us who are educators are confronted with this idea, especially from white teachers and administrators, that black people don't care about education. Parents we don't value it as much. But if you look into the historically, that is absolutely untrue.
It is
right?
completely untrue.
We were a people that risked death in order to read. Right? No one in this country had to do that. We risked death, the whip, imprisonment in order to educate ourselves and our children. So not only is that narrative false, it's historically inaccurate, and yet it's perpetuated in order to keep this paradigm functioning, that there's this savior mentality of that you are pouring into an empty vessel that is rejecting being uplifted or enlightened, and that's just simply that's just a very false narrative of education.
Yeah. And one other thing that I saw from that Bailey report that you mentioned, and I can't remember the exact quote, but it was about how the white teachers see like the spark or something like that in the students as like disruptive or
sass.
Yeah, that it's not valued. And even though I am only half black, I have experienced that continuously in my education from the time I was in kindergarten until graduate school.
Which is why it's important to have Fernando in the building.
You know, I as an educator, I call that differentiation, right? Because if I know a student is more antsy or engaged or talkative, right, then that's a strategy, right? That's me saying that, you know, if little Johnny here, I know is by far the leader in this room and can carry the conversation. Let me be intentional with my planning and maybe modify this particular group activity or this think, pair, share, or this particular turn and talk, and have little Johnny doing a particular component in that lesson in order to keep a more constructive classroom environment, right? But if you don't have that lens, then all of a sudden now, you know what? That same student, little Johnny, is a disruption.
Yeah. And I know this is not news to anyone at this table, but when I first started working in the schools, I worked in San Francisco, and the school was, I don't know, probably like 70% Chinese and then like 30% Latino. But 70 plus 30.
That's 100.
That's 100. Wow.
Oh, no, you guys!
What is in that cup?
Anyone want to guess what subject Rebecca did not teach at that school?
But it was a very small percentage of black kids were in that school. Okay, it was like
very small.
It's roughly 0 by my calculation.
Well, you know what? It might as well have been, because all of them were in special ed. So you looked in that special ed room, right? And it was all black kids. And it was heartbreaking because we'd go in the room and we'd work with those kids. And I'm sorry, there was nothing special ed about like any of them. Okay? They were just black kids that were at school. And their teachers, it was awful. You know, and I watched it happen again and again, and we've seen it over and over again, right? We know about it. But I think sometimes maybe white people they just don't care. They don't, that is not, and that goes back to what you said, where diversity is only important to people of color. And I feel like that's not something that's affecting them, so they don't care about it. And it is so frustrating to me because it doesn't really affect me in that way either. But I care an awful lot about it, enough to want to make a change. You know, so I don't even know what I'm talking about now.
No, it was it's a good antidote.
Like, what is America without diversity, right? Like, there's no jazz.
Theo Wilson said,
or hip hop.
He was like,
there's no Hamilton,
right?
You know, we just DPS just had
or seasoning on
27
Thanksgiving food, any of that,
right? There's no
a lot
creativity.
Yeah.
So I think that's the piece that makes America beautiful, diversity.
Oh, and I mean, I grew up in it essentially, right? I grew up in a house with a white mother and a black father, and I feel like in some ways. I don't like to get into this idea that like mixed people are gonna like save anything, or like I'm not into that at all, right? But I do feel like, particularly when you're mixed black and white at of a certain age, I'm that loving generation. Like I feel like there is a value in that I feel a connection to white culture and a connection to Black American culture. And I feel like I understand I know what they're thinking, y'all.
Do you see it as an advantage?
I do. In some ways, I mean, I feel like there has been times when I feel like it's not, I'm a tragic mulatta. Like, I'm not, I'm the best. But I feel like it helps me, though, to be able to understand what's going on. But it also makes me, like, go extra hard,
I think Black people have a fantastic understanding of white people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right? Because first of all, we've had to in order to survive.
Correct.
And I think what you're speaking to is what Du Bois talks about, this twin consciousness, this double consciousness that Black people have to do to survive.
Yeah.
And so I think perhaps you have a
Enlightened.
a closer view than most black people or people who are not mixed have. But I do think that Black people, we are the ones that know how to code switch.
Yeah.
We are the ones that have to learn that as a survival technique.
Of course.
Right? So,
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, it's all part of this education, right? And the importance of and I didn't want to miss that point insofar as making how important having Black educators inside of a building are, and how important it is to make sure and protect, and not just having them inside of the building, but having them inside of the building and being empowered, right? It's not enough for them just to show up and just be Black. You got to show up and be able to speak and engage and to guide freely in the way that you feel is best to do, and that's not happening systemically, and that's what the Bailey Report is about. And we have to change that. It's incumbent upon community to change that, because just like racism, white people are not going to change themselves without there being a democratizing of pain. And the truth of the matter is, no system is capable of changing itself without outside agitation. And so it's incumbent upon us to engage in that work.
H-Soul, you're always just dropping it in, and then I'm like, yeah, why do I even have my own thoughts?
Right.
Can I ask you a follow-up to that, though?
Yes.
So I'm curious, is there a conflict, though? Because when you were explaining your disposition by both being mixed on this mulatto, as you so eloquently put it.
Yeah. Nobody can say that but me and other mulattoes.
I've always wondered, is there also a level of complexity that comes along with being of mixed race?
Oh, yeah. I mean, my film, All Mixed Up, Our Changing Racial Identities, debuting May 9th at the CE Film Center. Get tickets online. Anyway.
I love it. Put it out there.
Talking about it, I mean, of course there is, but a lot of the work that I did on myself and thinking about it is because I don't identify as white. I just don't. Like, my mom was white, but I'm not. And the reason that I say that is because I spent almost 40 years of having people asking me where I'm from, what my nationality is, what are you? And so to me, that means whatever I look like, I don't look white. I don't look, quote unquote, normal, right? And so if that's my reality, that's my day-to-day. So I have always been, I think, fairly social justice minded just because of that and because of who my mom was and who my dad is. And I think so yeah, I think that it is complex. There is a certain sense of feeling like, oh, I don't fit into this or I don't fit into that. There is some of that. But for me personally, regardless of my physical appearance, I consider myself Black. And so that's why I do all the things that I do. That's why I have this show. That's why I'm always trying to talk to people. And I feel like it is easier for me because people feel more comfortable. Half the time they don't even know I'm Black. They're like, I thought you were Latina, right? And because that is like less scary. They're like, oh, a spicy Latina, you know, that's their feeling. And then I'm coming at them, right, with my talk.
Bitches.
I'm like, you know what I feel like? That's like
Sneak attack.
But that's like one of my jokes though, you know, where I'm just like I say, like, people think I'm in the circles, like in my professional life and stuff. To them, I'm like Malcolm X, pre-Mecca. That is how they feel about me, the stuff I'm saying. And I'm not even saying anything crazy, right? Okay, me.
Well,
Not tonight.
yeah, well,
Maybe a little bit.
Little bit.
Maybe a little bit. Because I'm on like the diversity committee at work, right? And I just tell everyone, I'm like, this is a white supremacist organization. And everyone's like, oh my God, Rebecca, stop.
right.
But because I feel like it is my job to speak up in spaces where maybe people won't feel comfortable, or maybe they can't because they need that job and they don't want to rock the boat, you know? So I do feel an extra sense of having to like, so I got into this fight on the Twitters, right? It was terrible. But somebody said, their comment was, they were like, oh, she's a mulatta that looks white, so it goes hard on the Afrocentric stuff. And I was like, true. I'm like, that is an excellent assessment of me, because that is the truth. And I know that about myself. I know what I look like, you know? And so, yes, I don't know. I'm on a rant, y'all.
Yeah, I like your rants.
But
I like your rants.
You know what?
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, you know, the reason I asked that, it reminded me of a story in my past. If you guys don't mind me sharing,
of course not.
when I was, I don't know, 17, 16, I had a chance to travel abroad. I went to a program called Memphis in May, and they take high school students from inner city Memphis and expose them to an international exchange for 3 or 4 weeks.
You said inner city.
Yeah, I know, right?
Urban.
Yeah, urban. So I had the pleasure of going to Morocco, Northern Africa country, and I never forget that. I mean, it had to be within 48 hours of getting off the plane, going to Casablanca. I had the opportunity to walk down the Medina and Fez, like the old cities, right?
Yeah.
And probably a weekend, I had a brother. Remember back in the day that everybody would walk past you and they'd be like, Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah.
Right? And you would just naturally reply, because that was just common nature.
X came out,
right?
okay? It was the Malcolm X
You know,
movie.
I had that moment, but then the guy, he looked at me, he said, where are you from? With this Northern African accent. And I said, I'm from America. And then he looked at me knowing that I was a young American, young Black American, right? He said, oh man, how privileged you are. To this day, that has stayed with me because, you know, I think about what's going on right now in the country with all the shootings. The PTSD, again, the PPTSD that our African-American young men exist and live with. I know right now, and it saddens me, that there are young men, especially in that Delta region of the country, that they were like me. They don't identify and understand or even have an appreciation that they're American because they don't feel it. I didn't feel it, guys, until somebody who was a foreigner in another country told me and enlightened me that there is privilege by just being of birth from this country. So I try to take that context, which is why I want to, you know, I asked you that question. I'm stuttering because when I get emotional, I stutter, right? That, for me, was profound, and I always try to compare it to how other subgroups or nationalities or races view themselves as Americans, because for me, that was my first time where I had the true understanding, right, without feeling the oppression that I was American. Right? So I just wanted to share that with you.
That's a deep story. I know we're wrapping up on time here. I would feel absolutely remiss if I didn't take a moment to acknowledge that this is the first time that I've been back to your show since Dr. Diggs was with us. In fact, he was sitting in the seat that you're sitting in, Rebecca. And I say that to say that his commitment to education was tremendous, and his loss is felt on a material level. His spirit is absolutely, however, felt present with us, and it is if we looked at Dr. Diggs's experience inside of the schooling system, he was a man that was getting ready to have to try to, at the tender age of 54, 56, I don't remember which one he was. 55. Try to find his way as far as what his next chapter was going to look like at 55, after serving a system faithfully. And it makes me fearful for brothers like Fernando, who and it talks to the Bailey Report about how Black genius is pushed out of these systems. And I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge that this was happening to Dr. Diggs, even as he first of all has doctor in front of his name, and had given service to the point that you wouldn't think that he would have to be struggling in that sense to maintain his ability to be inside and to express his passion towards education. But that's the reality for us, and it is incumbent upon me, and his spirit is with me when I engage in this battle, to make sure that brothers like Fernando and hundreds of others like Dr. Sampson or Makisha Booth or Sue Sam, I can give you list upon list of Black educators that have gone through this system and have been cast aside, or even if they stayed into the system, have been moved to one field to another plantation to another plantation to another. And I would be remiss if we did this podcast on education not to honor and to acknowledge Dr. Diggs' struggle inside of this educational system, and the importance for us to change it so that Fernando, when he's 55, is not looking or is not being tossed here to and fro based upon the whim of directors that don't understand or have an appreciation for what they bring to education.
Mm-hmm. Amen to that.
Amen.
Damn it.
I'm a 06 that, man. I got a 06 that.
I know. I'm like, every time. And now I'm all, wait, I want to show you guys this video. This is when James gets so mad at me. Okay, but seriously. Mm-hmm. Can I?
Yeah. What? Yeah.
Sure, show. Shit.
So I know this is just the end, and if you have anything, wait, is everybody done saying all their deep stuff? Okay, because I got the deepest stuff.
Is this part of the show?
It's going to be.
Okay.
If you put it at the end, anyway, as my funny button, if you think it's funny. So I just got tuned into this new podcast that I had not previously heard of. It's called The Nod. Shout out to The Nod. You don't know me, but your podcast tight. And they introduced me to this this YouTube Black conspiracy theorist. And his name...
He's real, or this is a joke?
We don't know. It's called...
I'll tell you if it's really not.
All right. So yeah, so I did want to know though, and this goes back to just a tiny bit of the Hotep idea. I was thinking about you a little bit when I listened to
I'm
this.
glad I stay on your mind.
Yeah. His name was Sean. Oh God, no, I can't even think of it. It's Sean DeBlasian or something like that.
You asked me
Yeah, I heard of you. Heard of
butchered
it,
that.
but I did.
Right.
I've been drinking. Okay, but seriously,
Watermelon.
I just feel like you have not. You guys don't even know. So I'm not gonna make you watch the whole thing, but I just want you to get like a little sample of him. Okay.
Greetings, my brothers. These last couple of days, I've been going through my papers, and I overlooked a few things. And as I look back, I realize I made some very terrible mistakes. Do you remember when I told you that Ray Shrummer was Michael Jackson's kids? Or when I told you Gucci Mane was really Michael Jackson? Or when I told you that Ice Cube is Michael Jackson's brother? Well, I was absolutely right about all of that. But what I failed to mention is that Toni Braxton and her sisters are the daughters of Michael and Tito Jackson. These are highly classified documentations I'm about to share with all of you. Toni Braxton's first single was titled Never Breathe Again.
This is why education is so important.
Okay, so then I did feel
Everyone else that's part of the Jackson
I did feel like it tied into that though, because like I, as an educated person, can really enjoy watching this, right? And I'm dying. I'm listening to the Nod podcast. I'm crying. I'm crying at work, right? Listening to it. And I was just like, this is the best thing I've ever heard in my life. And he has like tons of videos like this where he's like talking about like how everyone's a clone and how like, you know, people are this. I mean, it's like amazing.
Right.
However, people think this is real.
Listen, people thought that Trump was a viable candidate.
Hey.
That's the miseducation of the American populace is scary. It really is.
Yeah.
It's really, really scary. And so you're right. As we joke about that and we laugh about that, I think that's someone who's suffering from some mental illness. I mean, in all seriousness.
His name is Sean Blazington.
Yeah, I mean, and
Sean, are you okay?
I think that's somebody who's suffering from mental illness. Seriously, I do. And secondly, it goes to the fact of how Americans have been dumbed down. We really have. We have been dumbed down, and it's.
Sorry, I couldn't add that good.
Earlier, talked about, you know, the educational system and the dualness that exists inside of it, but yeah, that's a perfect example of.
I'm so sorry.
Said Gucci Mane is Michael Jackson's son.
For creativity.
Oh my God,
that's creative. That is creative.
Who makes that connection?
Right.
Nobody gets so much better because he says that Michael Jackson is actually Toni Braxton's father.
Yeah, he's all over the place.
And
he's all over the place. Yeah, I get it. I absolutely get it. But listen, you can. That's all over. That's all over right now, and it's not new. It's just new because now everybody has a microphone and access to.
Including me.
Hey, but you know, there's another side to that too, right? You know, we take that same clip and you take out the music and you put W.B. Du Bois. You know, you put Thurgood Marshall, Martin Luther King. Everybody a get right, but you start putting in those influential people of color. In front of our kids, you know, not just our black kids, but all of our kids. Would they know who those faces are?
Good point.
Because you know, the next question should be: do our textbooks, if we have textbooks, represent that history of this great nation? So
No. So I do feel like that term, the idea of miseducation, really resonates with me, and that. When you're saying the re-education. So I'm on board
All right.
for re-educating.
So you will be there May 12th.
May 12th, I will be there.
All right, it's good to hear.
Okay, but May 9th, will you
White
be
James, you're welcome
will you be my
to
film?
come as well.
Yeah. What day of the week is May 12th?
I don't know.
That's a Saturday.
Okay.
I'll be there.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Great to have you there.
We're looking forward to it.
Awesome.
Because, you know, Black Power.
And brown power and white power, people power.
people.
Yeah,
power.
yeah, H-Soul.
Listen, do you want to have to make another damn apology? I'm trying to save you the first 5 minutes of your own next fucking podcast, all right?
H-Soul.
Where you're trying to sound all...
No, but okay, so one last thing about that, though, is I feel like you have been improperly called Hotep. Because, okay, while you have some Hotepish tendencies, as I like to say, I feel like your message of inclusion and peace and getting us to a place of wholeness as a country and a nation and a community, all those things, is really admirable.
Thank you. I appreciate
Yeah.
that. I think that's probably as close to an apology as we're going to get, James. Listen, I'm taking it right now. So the next time I'm on your fucking show, can I get a decent introduction? I mean, that's what that would... Can we turn it into that, James? A
Yeah,
decent...
that sounds good.
Yeah.
I think we probably also want to end this thing before her position evolves.
Listen, I should have said I'm taking it and running.
Yeah.
So cut the fucking mics. But thank you both for
thank
having
you. Appreciate it.
Fernando and I on the show. It's really great to sit down with Fernando and hear him expound. We usually interact on these webs, as my daughter calls it. So it's great to be able to sit down with him and discuss these ideas, and of course to be back on this wonderful show and honoring the legacy of Dr. Diggs. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you both for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Off Color is hosted by Rebecca Henderson, produced by me, James Meekum, music also by me. Our website is offcolorpod.com. Subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere else you get podcasts. Follow us on Twitter at offcolorpod and find us on Facebook at offcolorpodcast. Thanks for listening.